Hello. Ariane here with a very quick video on Scarlet the Black Shadow. I apologize for the lack of editing on my hot take video as I am currently on vacation at my family's home and the computer cannot handle video editing. With that out of the way, let's go right into her skills. So Scarlet Black Shadow, or Wind Scarlet as I will call her, is a burst tree attacker Nikke rocket launcher that is wind coded. A few things to look into before we go into her skills is that she has a higher ammo capacity at 9 instead of 6 for the average of rocket launchers, a reload time of 2 seconds which is perfectly average, and 57.29% of attack as damage, which is lower than the average rocket launcher. In return, however, she has a charge time of 0.3 seconds, and a full charge damage that is also lower in return due to that charge time that is much lower of 150% of damage. Usually it's 250%, and the average rocket launcher is around 61 to 67% of attack as damage. Now, her S1 fading breakthrough is a 3-step that activates when attacking full charge. Each step does not duplicate on the additional steps. So when you attack 3 times, the lowest enemy defense will receive 250.47% of final attack as additional damage. Once you attack an additional 3 times, you will do 500 of final attack as distributed damage to all enemies within the attack range. And 9 times, meaning 3 additional times on top of that, 750.47% of final attack as distributed damage. Distributed damage meaning that the more targets there are, the more split the damage will be, but the total damage will be the exact same, meaning that on single target scenarios, those are the attack ratios that will be striking the boss in those scenarios. Her S2, Fading Asura, activates when entering full burst, and increases her max ammo capacity by 60% for 10 seconds, and reloads 100% of the magazines. Which is amazing because it will allow her to just strike non-stop during her burst with virtually no downtime whatsoever. Especially once overload lines are involved. Now, her burst skill, Fading Strike, affects herself and buffs herself. It changes full attack count for the S1 to 1, 2, 3. So instead of doing 3, 6, 9, meaning 3 attacks, it goes 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes for 10 seconds to activate each of the steps. She also increases her own attack by 115.12% for 10 seconds, which is hilariously close to her maximum stacks buff when she auto attacks on the OG Scarlet version, for those who know her. And also increases her own charge damage by 150.12% for 10 seconds, which is a very hefty buff as well. Do keep in mind that it just brings her back basically 50% above the average charge damage of a rocket launcher, but considering her skills, charge time, and so on, it's actually pretty impressive. Now, should you pull for Scarlet Black Shadow? Yes, you should. Absolutely you should. At least fetch 1 copy, especially those who are Modernia-less amongst you. Fetch 1 copy of Scarlet Black Shadow. She will serve you really well in both campaign and also in boss fighting. She's basically the strongest wind-coded Nikke that we have at the moment, because wind code is unfortunately incredibly copium at the moment. Especially with the likes of D and Epinel and so on. So she's going to be the absolute best wind-coded DPS in the game. And she's also the more usable one, as Guilty is an incredible wind-coded DPS, but she's on the Burst 2 slot, which is usually used most of the time for what we call more, how do I put it? Utility slots, such as cooldown reduction, damage amplification, and general buffing and or healing. Now, why do I say she is an amazing pull to have and why you want 1 copy of? Well, I spent quite a bit of time researching and calculating Scarlet myself, and I found out by comparing her to Red Hood that at her ideal stat lines, which I will go into pretty soon, She is basically on par with Red Hood. 99.36% of Red Hood's damage over a whole fight is no slouch levels of damage. It is incredible amounts of damage, but this is when comparing ideal Red Hood versus ideal Scarlet. If you're taking a cube in a team agnostic situation, of course, this is team agnostic. Now, teams may change the results of this quite wildly. Now, what I say by ideal situation is I put the ideal OL lines and ideal cubes on both Red Hood and on Scarlet. So by doing a little bit of research and optimization, I found that the ideal OL lines for Red Hood are essentially 4 attack lines, 2 lines of ammunition, 4 lines of elemental damage, and 2 lines of crit rate. The ideal cube for team agnostic situations will be resilience, but Bastion could come very, very useful if you're pairing her with things like Bunny Girls and so on, especially with Leader. Bunny Girls, a little bit odd, but especially with things like Leader and so on for infinite ammo shenanigans, which is perfectly feasible as far as Scarlet is actually concerned. It is actually feasible. Now, why are these lines very optimal? Attack, of course, the usual, attack and elemental always. 2 lines of ammunition when you take into consideration her ammo capacity increase for 10 seconds and her reload. You're basically minimizing the downtime during her off-burst time and enabling a little bit more of an infinite ammo. Even on her own, she will be very close to some insane levels of uptime. And crit rate is a funny one because I have started to actually implement crit rate calculations and crit damage calculations into my spreadsheets to have a little bit of a more realistic outlook on it. And crit rate actually comes out on top, as your crit damage will basically not matter so much if you don't have crit rate. Now, this is team agnostic, meaning that if you pair her with specific things, these breakpoints may change. But I personally prefer to do the OL lines to be completely team agnostic so that you have the most flexibility possible when it comes to choosing what to prioritize on your Nikke. So, I think I mentioned it, but it is roughly 84% if you remove all of the OL lines. If you remove all of the OL lines and all of the optimizations on both Red Hood and Scarlet here, meaning a fresh out of the box 10-10-10 Scarlet and a fresh out of the box 10-10-10 Red Hood, which one is better? Well, let me just edit that for you, and you will get the answer for that. It is, a spoiler alert, it is roughly 84% of Red Hood's damage, but a interesting case nonetheless. Just to know how good she is out of the box. So here you go, 84.83% right out of the box. Now, for team compositions, you will wanna shout out to Nikke.gg, as I will be using their Nikke database for this. For team compositions, generally speaking, it's gonna be very likely a mix of the usual suspects. The best team will very likely be something along the lines of Bunny Girls, meaning Blanc and Noir. Damage amplification, healing, and overall ammo capacity and the like, especially for when she's not the one, especially since Noir provides off-burst ammo capacity up, and when combined with Leader could allow for some infinite ammo shenanigans, especially with those 2 lines of ammunition. Remember, Leader has max ammo capacity as well up for 45% for 5 seconds, meaning that there is a high chance that even with Leader alone and very high ammo percentage and maybe a Bastion, you could actually manage something very close to infinite ammo. The other usual suspects, you may have guessed it, Nagatia. As usual, attack buffs, damage to core, attack damage as well. In the case of Tia, as I've mentioned it multiple times, attack damage is a higher type of attack buff than other attack buffs. Far more powerful, as within the damage calculation, it enters within what would be considered damage to parts. Now, other options include things like novel, one of the usual suspects as well. And you can even add volume since crit is also pretty good. So something like volume novel, or you could even add volume and guilty as well. If you want to go more wind coded, you could go volume guilty, as she will basically shred things to pieces. Burst tree pairs as some of the usual suspects. You could even go privity for some reload speed shenanigans, but that would be up to you. Now, as for Arena, she is a rocket launcher, so she could have some usages, but will she replace things like Scarlet in Arena? Probably not. Oh yeah, I need to get this out of the way, very much out of the way. OG Scarlet is not getting replaced anytime soon by the new Scarlet, especially when it comes to campaign push. To be able to match in campaign push OG Scarlet, she would need to peek her head out for a solid 3 seconds in terms of AoE damage, and in campaign it is incredibly dangerous to peek your head out for that long in many stages. That is why, for example, I don't value using Modernia Burst that often, and I opt to some alternatives when possible. Modernia is amazing for campaign push, don't get me wrong, but there will be a lot of stages where I will end up using even Haran instead of Modernia, because I would rather have this instant clean instead of having to peek out my head for too long and have my Nikke one-tapped. So OG Scarlet is definitely not getting replaced, and she will be amazing for screen wipe scenarios, and she will outdo the new Scarlet when it comes to many enemies, as this is distributed damage, so it's a similar situation to Dorothy, where she will pull insane numbers in single target, and she will pull very good numbers in AoE, but the more targets there are, the less damage she will do. You can think of it as well as a 2B situation when I was doing the 2B hot take. The more targets there are, the less damage it will do. Now, as I was saying for Arena, she could be used as a stall option similar to Summer Anise, although less viable than Summer Anise in that regard, as she could basically slash the enemy team and generate quite a bit of burst as well at the same time, being rocket launcher and whatnot. Due to Summer Anise basically doing on 2 targets, this would be essentially a 764-ish% attack as a final attack as damage total every second during her burst, which allows her to do an amazing amount of DPS within those 10 seconds. In the case of Scarlet, she could do a similar, she could fill a similar niche, especially for those who don't have Summer Anise, and allow to do that slash on enemies, especially 250 on one target and then the others. It is distributed damage, so if you go like this, it would be essentially 250 plus 500 plus 700 divided by 5, and the whole thing divided by 100, and I will also divide it by 3 here, as it is every 3 slashes, meaning every roughly a bit over 3 seconds. But we'll just call it 3 seconds for simplicity's sake. Meaning that overall her expected damage per second is significantly lower than Anice's, but she could fill that role in Arena to some extent, and being Rocket Launcher, she could just be also a generator. And she can continuously do this as well before bursting, so there is... it's a little bit more complicated, but she may not be as good as Summer Anise, but she could fill a similar role in Arena. With that out of the way, I hope you enjoyed this hot take. It took me quite a bit of work to get these numbers and estimations, so I hope it really helps you on whether or not you should pull. And as always, Alienate out.